All right, good morning. Starting at the bottom of Vav Amud Aleph, Maseches Megillah. We're about 9 lines or so from the bottom, and we're going to learn a lot of Agadata Gemaras, a couple of halachic Gemaras, and we will learn some of the famous ones about the mitzvah to get drunk on, or the mitzvah to drink, I should say, on Purim, the mitzvah of Matanos Levyonim, the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos Ish L'Re'ehu. One of the old pet peeves of calling it shalach manos. It's not the right word. It's mishloach manos. So we'll see today some of that language here in the Gemara. But let's get started with a couple of agadatas. 10 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says, Kesari v'Yerushalayim, the city of Caesarea and Yerushalayim. Im yomar lach adam charvu shtehen. If anyone will tell you that both of them have been destroyed, al te'amen, you should not believe them. Yashvu shtehen, if both of them were in existence and settled, al ta'amen, you also shouldn't believe them. They seem to be a mutually exclusive bunch. Charva Kesari, v'yashva Yerushalayim. If Caesarea had been destroyed and Yerushalayim had been settled, then that would be believable. And as well, Charva Yerushalayim v'yashva Kesari. And if it were to have been the case that Yerushalayim was destroyed and Caesarea was built up nicely, great, ta'amen, that's all believable. Shne'emar, because answer number one is because imala hacharafa. What does it mean? I will be full and I will be destroyed. So the drasha is imaleazu charavazu. If one city is full and well, the other is going to be destroyed. Imaleazu, and if one is full, then charavazu. So basically, they're yin and yang. Whenever one is successful, the other is not well. Bottom of Vav Amud Aleph, about 6-7 lines from the bottom. So that was answer number one as to how we know that Caesarea and Yerushalayim can't coexist. And then Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Mehacha, he has another pasuk, Ul'om Mil'om Yamatz. One's going to be stronger than the other, and similar application over here. Another comment from Rav Yitzchak. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Mai Dechsiv. What does the pasuk mean when it says Yuchan Rasha? We should be gracious to the Rasha. Bal Lomad Tzedek. So we not to learn from his tzedek, from his righteousness. A difficult pasuk to understand. So the Gemara highlights that this is actually a dialogue between Yitzchak and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amar Yitzchak lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shalom, Yuchan Esav. Look, he's not the greatest guy in the world, but Yuchan, we should have a little bit of grace to him. Amar Lo, Hashem says back, who's in charge here? Hashem says back to Yitzchak, Rashahu, he's not a good guy. What are you talking about? So Amar Lo, Baal Lama Tzedek. There's nothing that you could learn from him that's good. So Amar Lo, Be'eretz Nechochos Yavel. He's going to destroy Eretz Yisrael. So this is already like the line in the sand. And when Yitzchak heard this, end of conversation, he was masking Amar Lo Imkein Bal Yirageus Hashem, that he should not be zoche to greet HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Olam Haba. A similar story, but one generation later. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, "My dechsiv." What does the pasuk mean when it says, "Al titein Hashem ma'avaye rasha"? Don't give the desires, give into the desires of the evil. Zimamo al tafek yerumusela, and don't remove his nose ring. What does this mean, yerumusela? So it says the Gemara, Amar Yaakov. Now we started with Yitzchak in the previous one. Now we're talking about Yaakov. Amar Yaakov lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shalom. Al titain le'esav harasha taivas libo. Don't allow him to have the desires of his heart, which is to destroy the Jewish people. What does it mean when it says zimamo al tafek? Don't remove his nose ring. So the Gemara says zu Germamia shel Edom. This is the city of Germamia, which is in Edom. So according to some, this speaks of a location known as Germany, at least the predecessor terminology. I don't know if the locale is the same historically. I have no idea. But the Gemara then says, She'ilmale hein yotzin, if you take off the nose ring, if you let the Germamians out of their cage, the Macharibin called Olam Kula, they were very dangerous people, so they would destroy the world. And the Gemara says about this, V'amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, that how was it that Yaakov got his prayer to be answered to not have the nose ring taken out? Like, how did it work out that they didn't destroy the world? So the Gemara says on line 3 above Mubez, Tlas mea malche ktire taga, there were Tlas mea, there are 300 malche ktira taga ika, there are 300 crowned kings, begermamia shel Edom, in that country of Germamia shel Edom. Utlas mea v'shisin, and there are 365 marzavne ika beromi, and there are 365 Roman leaders. Fine. Uvechol yoma, every day, nafke hani la'ape hani. These two countries are warring with one another. And umak til chad minayu umitra de leukme Malka, and every day they have a battle, and they've killed someone who would become a king or become a leader, and then they have to replace him. So they're spending so much time fighting with each other that they're not fighting with Klal Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, yet another comment from Rabbi Yitzchak, probably one of the most well-known phrases throughout Shas, says the Gemara, Im yomar lach adam yagati v'lo matzasi. If a person says, I worked hard, Rashi says we're talking about learning Torah. If a person says, I worked hard and I was not able to understand the Torah, al ta'amin. This is a guarantee. If you work hard in learning, you are gifted something beyond your own capacity. It's not normal. It doesn't just mean the math problem was hard and I worked at it until I toiled, until I found it, figured it out. Now I know how to do the math. No, you get to have a deeper level, a greater level of understanding if you are Yageya. And if a person says the reverse, lo Yagati, I haven't worked hard, but Matsasi. If a person says, I don't really work so hard in my learning, but I understand everything and then some. So that's also al ta'amin. You should not believe that person. Yagati umatsasi. But if a person says, I did work hard and I did find the results in learning, te'amein, then yes, absolutely, you can then believe that person. That's a trustworthy comment. And the Gemara says 10 lines down on Vav Amud Beis, qualifying this comment, Hani Mili b'divrei Torah. This applies when we are speaking about Talmud Torah. Aval b'masu v'matan. When it comes to business, whatever yigia you put in does not correlate with the outcome. Siyatahu min shemaya. You can try until you're blue. It doesn't matter. We don't control these things. Yes, there needs to be a hishtadlos. You have to get a job, and you have to try to get a job that reasonably will support your family. Got it. But the actual dollar amount that comes into the bank account every couple of weeks, that's not something that you can control. That's all from upstairs. And even uledivrei Torah, and even in regards to when one says yogato mutzatzo tamin, that if a person works hard, that there is a correlate between your yagia and your mitzia. That's lo amran al chidude. That's only in regards to the sharpness, in regards to the power of understanding things. Aval okme girsa, but to remember everything, we're trying to plow through Shas. We're like 715 blot into Shas. Let's be straight up. What percentage of Shas do we know? It's not a very large percentage. So that is l'ukme girsa. When it comes to memory, siyatim in shemayu. Those things are from upstairs. Again, we do need to do chazara. That doesn't mean it lands the first time and that you get everything the first time. Maybe in addition to a fast-paced learning like this, we need a slow-paced shiur separate of this to let things sink in still deeper. That's fine. But to say that that the siyata dishmaya that's not how it works. You only have siyata dishmaya when it comes to learning. You can't just have yigia. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Let's move on to another statement of Rabbi Yitzchak. If you see that there is a time when for a Rasha everything is going very smoothly, everything is going his way, al tiskarebo. Don't mess around with him. Kadosh Baruch Hu's got something bigger going on. This is bigger than you. Shneimar al tischar b'mreim. You should not be making battles with those who do evil. Not only that, the pathways he chooses will be successful. That this Rasha at this moment is going to have good happen to him. Not only that, but if you see that this Rasha is having a good run, then even upstairs he's going to have good dinim, good mazel. Things are going to go his direction. Not only that, he'll be able to see his enemies. He'll be able to blow down his enemies with ease. So it seems that when the Rasha is doing very well, that we're not supposed to push against it. But then says the Gemara, is that really true? The Rasha doesn't get pushed back from the tzaddik. That doesn't make any sense. 1/3 of the way down. Amar of Yochanan, Yishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, muter li iskarus b'rashayim b'olam hazeh. We just had from Rabbi Yitzchak that you're not allowed to mess with Rishayim. Says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, absolutely, you can mess with Rishayim, absolutely. Shenamar, Ozve Sora, Yahalalu Rasha, V'shomrei Torah, Yizkaru Bam. The pasuk, it's a mefurish pasuk, you can be Mizkara. Tanya as well, Rav Dustai Bar Matun Omer, Mutar Lizkaris B'Rashayim B'olam hazeh. Another explicit comment that we can, in fact, make a stink, and we can put up our values against their values. If a person says, I don't know, I'm not so comfortable, fine. That may be a din in you. That's fine. If you feel like you're not righteous enough, Rashi says here that if you feel like you don't have enough mitzvos or you have too many averos, then fine. Maybe you're not the right person to go up against them. But if you're the right kind of tzaddik, we'll see what that means momentarily, then yes, of course, you are allowed to fight with them. No problem at all. So says the Gemara, Ella, how do we understand the pasuk al tischar b'mereim? If it doesn't mean that you can't fight with them. What does it mean? It means Leos Kimarim. It means you shouldn't be like they're evil. It means you shouldn't learn from them. We shouldn't be jealous of the bad that they do. Leos we shouldn't want to be like them. Lastly, we should not want to be like them. So now we have a pshat in the pasuk in two different directions, which means we have to try and figure out who's right. So we have two different understandings of these psukim. One says that Rabbi Yitzchak says that you're not allowed to be miskara with the Rishayim, and a lot of other Marim Makomos, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is no slouch, so he says you're allowed. So how does it work? So answers the Gemara halfway down, 7-8 lines before the middle with lines. Lokasha, habimile didei, habimile dishmaya. It depends what you're standing up for. If it's a personal fight, leave it alone. Just leave it alone, you're going to lose. If the Rosh is having a good run, you're going to lose. But habemili deshmaya, when you're going to stand up for the Torah values, something's happening that's not right, and you plant the flag of Torah Judaism, then you're going to win with that particular person. Some say that's not really the way to understand the sources. Really, it could even be about regular issues, interpersonal issues, not ones that have to do with religious values. First of all, it's good to know that you can be a tzaddik she'einu gamur. It's good news for the Jews because most of us are not tzaddikim gemurim. So says the Gemara, there is a distinction between the tzaddik gamur and the tzaddik she'einu gamur, the full tzaddik and only the partial tzaddik. What's the difference between them? The Amar of Huna, my dichsiv. What does the pasuk mean when it says lo sabit bogdim tacharish bevala rasha tzaddik mimenu? So let's translate this pasuk tzaddik mimenu. If the person's a little bit more righteous than the other guy, than the Rasha who's having a good run, boleh, you'll get swallowed. That's not it. For the average consumer. We can put ourselves, let's say in theory, we could put ourselves that we don't do any big averas. We're good people. We stumble here and there, but we're tzaddikim. We're just not tzaddikim gemurim. So then we're not the right people to do it. But if you're a tzaddik gamur, remember we saw distinctions in Maseches Tainis, our previous Masechta, people who were able to dive into HaKadosh Baruch Hu and they just had Hashem wrapped around their finger, like whatever. Whenever Akiva opened his mouth, the rain started, like these unbelievable levels. So that's for a tzaddik gomer. So here we're not that level. But if you are a tzaddik gomer, eino boleh, then you will not get swallowed. And then yes, even in interpersonal relationships, you can fight against Rishayim. And another way to say it is that no, don't mess around at all. Shah meshachekes lo shiny. That when the Rosh is having a good run, there's just no messing around, no distinctions to be made. Yes, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says you're allowed to be miskara with a Rasha, but he didn't mean here. So there's three ways to understand this. So you have the two dots. First, of the very long middle with lines on Vav and Beis, the Gemara says Amar Ula Italia shel Yavan, the Italy, which is in the domain of Yavan of Greece, Zekrach Gadol shel Romi. That's one of the big cities, one of the big locales of Rome. We know that to be true to date, of course. Vahavia, and its size is Tlasmea Parsa, al Tlasmea Parsa, 300 square parsas. V'yeshba Shin Samachei Shivakim Kiminyin Mosachama. They had 365. They had 365 marketplaces or shuks or stores, one for each day of the solar year. The Katan Shebekulam, the smallest of them, Shel Mochre Ofos, was one that sold chickens or birds. Vahavia Shisha Asar Mil, al Shisha Asar Mil. That's a very big store. That's what real estate is all about. And this is a massive chicken store, and it was the smallest of them all. Umelech, the king of that empire, would eat from one of the 365 marketplaces, one per day. And then he'd be able to reach everyone by the end of the year. And then what were the benefits of being part of the kingdom? So says the Gemara, Hadarba, anyone who lived there, Afal Pisha Eno Nolad, but you're an import. You immigrated to Italy. If you lived in that space in Rome, whatever the exact location is, we don't know, but it's somewhere over there in the boot. So if you were born there, if you lived there, but you were not born there, notel prasmi beis hamelech, you were able to take from the goods of the government. And as well, if someone was born there, afal pi she'eino darba, you moved out of town, you read, then notel prasmi beis hamelech. So as long as you had anything to do with the country, you could still benefit from the goods of the government. There were 3,000 bathhouses there. And there were 500 windows. And when steam doesn't cause for walls to blacken, but when you're burning wood to make the water hot, that does. So they would make sure that they had this venting system where the blackened smoke would exit the walls of the city and not blacken this. It was just a clever contraption, right? They don't have, the type of systems that we have, but we have these tall chimneys, but that's what they did. They built these, they called them chalonos, windows, but it was a system to let the air out in a space when it wouldn't cause for any problems. So what were the four sides of Rome? Last line before the new Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down on Vav Amud Beis, Tzido Echad Yam. On one side there was water. So now we know that it's not the whole country of Italy, because the whole country of Italy is surrounded by water. So now we know we're only talking about one aspect of this country, but let's see if we can figure out a little bit more. Tzido Echad Yam. On one side they had the shore. The Tzido Echad Har Mugvos. On the other side, they had mountains. They had a mountain range. Tzido echad mechitza shel barzel. They had built for themselves an iron wall. Tzido echad chul sisu mitzula. On the other side, they had a wall built from rocks and from water, a moat of some kind, whatever it was, and that's what it was. So we know it wasn't the whole country. It was a large piece of area, presumably. Although 300 parsa by 300 parsa, the Gemara uses the number 300 all the time. There are Meforshim who discuss this topic. Why is it always 300? We have 400 often. There's like a lot of common themes and numbers. Okay, so but either way, this was up against the shore and not the whole country. That brings us to a new Mishnah toward the bottom of Vav Amud Beis. This Mishnah is going to speak about some halachic aspects of Kriyas HaMegillah when there are 2 months of Adar, as we have this year. However, our calendar was well determined before we got to this year. So we knew that there was going to be an Adar Rishon and an Adar Sheni. But back in the day, when they'd be Mekadesh al Piriyah, it could happen that you would only know that you would need an Adar Sheni once you've already laned in Adar Rishon. So what happens in that case with Adar Sheni? What do you do? So that's what this Mishnah discusses. Let's say 14th comes around, whatever city you're in. Remember, we focused on our Mishnah on Daf Beis. We focused on our Mishnah on Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tes Vav, that the Megillah can be read in any of those days. And that first Mishnah detailed how that would all play out. But let's say you read the Megillah, and then V'nis Abra Hashana, and then the decision of Beis Din was that we need to have an Ibur year, an Ibur yor. So we have to add another month in. So we're going to add an Adar Sheni right now. But you already laned, and you already did all the mitzvot, say Matanos Daf Yomi, Nishlach Manos Shiur, you had a Suda, you drank, you did everything already. So it says the Gemara, what do you do? So our Mishnah has no machlokes in it at all. Koren osa be'adar sheni. Reread. Good. And ain bein adar harishon adar hasheni. There's no difference between the first adar and the second one. Elakriyas hamegillah umatanos le'evyonim. Except for these two. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says 2/3 of the way down where it says masnisin dibur hamaschil ela mikra megillah klomar shimaso berishon lo yatsa. In a year, when we have 2 months, if you were to have lain the Megillah in the first of those 2 months of Adar, you're not Yotze. That is the Shita of our Mishnah. And we're going to be asking right now in the Gemara, whose Shita is this? Where does this come from? We'll get to that in a moment. The Gemara opens, Hala inyan seder parshios zev ezeh shavin. However, both months are seemingly equal as it relates to the Dalet Parshios. What are the Dalet Parshios? Take a look at Rashi again. The next Rashi, the one after the one we saw, Gemara, Dibur Hamaschil, Seder Parshios, Parshas Shkalim, V'Zachor, Upara, V'Hachodesh. Those are the 4 Parshios. And the Rashi finishes up, Ditznan b'mas nisin, Dibnei Ha'ir, Denohagin be'adar. Fine. Okay, let's discuss this later, but we'll get into the Parshios later. But that's what the Gemara says, is that when it comes to Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni, while the Tana of our Mishnah agrees that the Megillah can only be read in Adar Sheni, the 4 Parshios can be read in either month. That's what it seems to be. Zev ezeh shavin, they have the same halacha. Let's continue. The Gemara asks, Mani mas nisin, who is our Mishnah like? Now, what the Gemara is asking here is that we have another source in the Tanaim that we have to contrast with our Mishnah. And that source has 3 opinions in it. And in that Mishnah, in that brisa that we're about to see, none of them seem to match our Mishnah. Lo Tanakama, lo Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi, lo Rashbag. So let's see. We know what our Mishnah says, that you are only allowed to read the Megillah in the 2nd month. And even if you read it in the 1st month, if we then decide to be Ma'aber the Shana, so then you have to read the Megillah again in Adar Sheni. So we know it's none of those opinions. Let's learn all 3 of those opinions and recognize how it doesn't align with the Tana of our Mishnah. The Tanya, 4 lines into the wide lines. The Tanya, Karu es ha-Megillah ba'adar harishon v'nis abra hashana. Same opening of our Mishnah. That let's say on the 1st month of Adar you celebrated Purim perfectly. Kehilchasa, you laned everything, and then it was a decision to make to be ma'aber the shana. Koron osa be'adar sheni. Then yes, you should read it in the second month. Shekol mitzvah shenoagos b'sheni nohagos b'rishon chutz mikra Megillah. So that's not the same as our Mishnah, because it's true that he says that mikra Megillah can only be in the second month, but in our Mishnah it also includes matanos le'evyonim. And it says that Matanos Avyonim cannot be done in the first month in our Mishnah. That's our Tanakama. But here, the first Shita in this Brisa seems to be of the opinion that you can only do Matanos Avyonim, that you can, how does it work? That he says, Chutz mi Mikra Megillah, that Mikra Megillah has to be read in the second month, but Matanos Avyonim could even be given in Adar Rishon according to the Tanakama. So that is the first Shita. And the second shita in the Brisa is like this: Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Ein koren osa be'adar sheni, that we are not allowed to read it in the second month. That's a wild shita. We don't hold that way, of course. It says the Gemara, Shekol mitzvah shenoagos b'sheni, noagos b'rishon. Each month is the same as the other. That is the shita of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, a very, very different shita than our Mishnah. At least the first shita was close. Rashba Gomer Mishum Rabbi Yossi, Af Koren Osa Be'adar Sheni. You could even read it in the second month. And here's how the Brisa explains: Shekol mitzvah shenagos b'sheni, ein noagos b'rishon. That you should read it again, but because they're not noheg in that first month, the shavin, and seemingly all of these opinions are equal in regards to the following: that on each of the Purim days during each of those months, that there's a restriction on giving eulogies and on fasting on Yud Dalet. So the first question that the Gemara asks is that it seems that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Hainu Tanakama, because they both seem to agree that the only time that you can read the Megillah is in the second month. So Amar Rav Papa, Seder Parshios Ika Beinayu. Really, there is a difference between the Tanakama and Rashbag, and that is the Seder Parshios, the 4 Parshios that Rashi referenced: Shkalim, Zachor, Para, and Chodesh. The Tanakama Savar Lechatchila B'Sheni. The Tanakama, even though the Brisa doesn't speak about it at all, the Tanakama was of the opinion that the Dalet Parshios should be in Adar Sheni, but the Avud B'Rishon Avud. But if you did them in the first month, you'd be Yotze. Barmi Mikra Megillah, except for the reading of the Megillah, Da'af al Gab de Kara B'Rishon Kara B'Sheni. So that's how we would understand the opinion of the Tanakama, with the 2 factors of Megillah that can only be in Adar Sheni, but the Parshios that can be in Adar Rishon. For Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi, Savar Afilu Mikra Megillah Lechatchila B'Rishon. And Rabbi Eliezer holds, as we saw, that Lechatchila one can read in Adar Rishon, and if they decide to be Ma'aber the Shana, there's no need to read again. You were Yotzei Purim. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Savar Afilu Seder Parshios, even in regards to the Parshios, he Kara B'Rishon, Kara B'Sheni. He held that the Seder Parshios can't be read in the first month at all. Some money. How do we work out the authorship of our Mishnah? Is our Mishnah one of these 3 opinions, or is it a new 4th opinion? So says the Gemara, here's our problem. Itana kama kashim atanos. If we say that our Mishnah is like the sheets of the Tanakama and the Brisa that contrasts with our Mishnah, then Matanos Levyonim don't match, because our Tana of our Mishnah said Matanos Levyonim and Megillah must be in the second month, and the Tanakama held that while Megillah has to be in the second month, Matanos Levyonim could still be in the first month. So it can't be him. Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yossi Kashanami Mikra Megillah. According to Rabbi Yossi, he holds that you can read the Megillah in the first month and therefore nothing to speak of. Of course, that doesn't align with our Mishnah, which says you can only read it in the second. And Rashbag, and according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Kasha Seder Parshios, his approach to the Seder Parshios also doesn't make any sense with what we presume to be the case of our Mishnah. So the Gemara provides a couple of answers as to who the authorship of our Mishnah is like. Le'olam, according to one Tanakama, our Mishnah is really like the Tanakama. The Tana Mikra Megillah v'hu adin Matanos Avyonim. And really, there's no difference between Matanos Avyonim and Megillah. So we're just going to correct the sheet of the Tanakama and the Brisa to align with our Mishnah. Deha beha talya, very important halachic concept here, that it's possible that Mikra Megillah and Matanos Avyonim are interwoven, and there's no way to separate them. They're inextricably bound from one another, and therefore when you do one in 1 month, the other will always follow in tow. A second way to understand the authorship of our Mishnah is the Olam Rashbagi. Really, the author of our Mishnah is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. And our Mishnah really should read as follows. And when we understand this new read, we will then understand how to understand our Mishnah. Ein bein arba asar sheba adar. harishon le'arba asar sheba adar hasheni ela mikra Megillah umatanos. The only difference between first and second month is mikra Megillah and matanos Daf Yomi. However, hala'inyan hesped b'tain is zev is eshadim v'lu seder parshios lamayri, and our Mishnah wasn't referencing at all. There's no room to even imply that our Mishnah was discussing the Seder Parshios, and therefore we don't have to worry about that being the flaw of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion. So that's the two different ways to understand our Mishnah. And the second way is that we hold that our Mishnah was authored by or equal to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. How do we paskin in this regard? So Amar Rabbi Chia bar Avin, Amar Rav Yochanan, Hilchasa, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Sha'amar Mishum Reb Yossi. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is the one who wins. How does Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and our Tanakama, how do they figure all this out? Amar Rav Yochanan, Ushneim Mikra'echa Darshu. They figured this out. Both of them have their own shitas from one pasuk. And says the Gemara, going back to a pasuk that we analyzed already, I think in 4 different ways. We already learned this a couple of blot ago. The drasha is 5 lines from the bottom, b'chol shana v'shana, that we're talking about the pasuk that refers to every year and year. How do we understand that? Rabbi Eliezer bar Yossi, who is of the opinion that you read in Adar Rishon. How did he understand this pasuk? Savar b'chol shana v'shana. When he looked at that pasuk, he understood ma kol shana v'shana Adar hasamuch l'shvat. Right? What's the flow of the year? Shvat Adar. Shvat is before Adar. So just like in the normal year, we say the Megillah in the month of Adar closest to Shvat. Afkan, even in a year where we decided to make it an Iber Yor, so still it should be Adar Hasamuch L'Shvat, just like any other year. So we now know in our cycle, in order to keep the lunar and solar calendars aligned, that 7 out of every 19 years, we are me'aber the shana. We add in an Adar base. Fine. So says the Gemara that because most of the time Shvat immediately precedes the Adar in which we do the Megillah. So then if it happens to be a year where we were Ma'aber the Shana, still that year we're still going to do Adar Rishon. That's how he reads the pasuk. The Rashbang Savar, he read the pasuk of B'chol Shana V'Shana differently. Ma Kol Shana V'Shana Adar Hasamach Nisan. There's 2 ways to look at it, right? It's in the normal year it's Shvat Adar Nisan, and Adar is either going to be close to Shvat or to Nisan. In most years, it's close to both. But what happens in a year where there's a Shnas Ibor? So Afkan, Adar Hasamach Nisan, that when there is a Shnas Ibor, we can only do so in the second year. But the Gemara has a problem with this. 3 lines from the bottom. Bishlama Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yossi Mistaber Taimo De'ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. I actually understand a little bit better the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, which is that we don't want to pass up on an opportunity to do a mitzvah. So if there's a date on the calendar called Yud Dalet Adar, and it happens to be the first of those 2 months, it's better to do the mitzvah then than to wait a month. Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. We don't just pass up on opportunities. That's why when on Friday nights we have the bottom challah closer to us because Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. We're eating from the bottom challah. On Shabbos day we reverse it. Top challah is closer because Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. Talis and tefillin. So the tefillin have to be reachable. The talis has to be reachable first because Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. And in fact, if you take out your tefillin first and then you say, I really should put on my talis first. No, Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. At that point, you put on your tefillin first, followed by your talis. So that's why you have to arrange your talis bag, right? And the complexity is, yes, the talis needs to be reachable first, but it also has to be under the tefillin because tefillin have more kedusha because they have parchment in them. So you have to arrange your bag where the tefillin are on top of the talis, but they're shifted in a way where you get to your talis first so that we don't have to worry about Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. So somebody asked Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, what if your talis and tefillin are right to left and the zipper on the bag opens and when you finish zipping, you're closer to the tefillin? He says, no, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. It's a great shiloh. I mean, it's true. Your hand is there. So now do you go to the closer side? That's not, it's like almost too much. He's like, that's not Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. So that's what we do. We have our talis under our tefillin. So this is tefillin, this is talis, and it's shifted in a way where when I reach into my bag, I can grab the talis first. But if in fact you do grab your tefillin first, you have to put on your tefillin first. That would be problematic.
I remember where that figure.
Multiple times. That's how I learned it. I didn't learn it here. I was just sitting listening to the shul rabbi. So that's what the Gemara says about Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. So that makes it more understandable to read the Megillah in Adar Rishon because Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. That's not right. If we have a date on the calendar of Yud Dalet Adar, that's what was written in Megillah's Tainis. That's how we know that we have the date of Purim. Why don't we read it on Adar? It's a great argument. It's Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos. So we understand his opinion. Ela Rashbag, 2 lines from the bottom, my timer. How can you say that we will be violating Ein Ma'avir Nala Mitzvos? That's effectively what you're saying, whether you like it or not. That is what's implied. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Tavi, Taima de Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Mismach Geula leGeula Adif. So here things get a little more juicy. He says that it's better to have two Geulas in a row and to worry less about Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos. What does the two Geulas refer to? Rashi, the last line, Purim lePesach. We want the month that has Purim and the month that have Pesach to be right next to one another. And those two things are more powerful than the halachic idea of Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos. So that requires research. That requires discussion. How can it be that this idea of Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos, which is found throughout Shas, we just discussed the halachic sugya of how to put your talis in film. It's technical. But what's Rashbag thinking that you need? Who cares? What's the whole idea of smichas gula legula? So that requires some time and some thought. But that's what the Gemara says. Rabbi Eliezer, Amar, Taima de Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel mehacha. The reason for Rabban Gamliel is a little different. Dichsiv lekayim es haigeres hapurim azos shenis. That's what the pasuk says. Ve'itzrich lemichtav top of Zayin Amud Aleph hashenis. Ve'itzrich lemichtav b'chol shana b'shana. So he has two parts of the drasha. One is to say the word shenis, and the other is that it says b'chol shana b'shana. If we only had every single year, havamina kikushan, I would have had the question that I just asked about Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos. Kamash Malon Hashenis, that it has to be in the second month. So it's a pasuk that overrides the concern of Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos. V'yashmin and Hashenis, if we only had the pasuk Hashenis, havamina b'tchila, B'rishon u'b'sheni. I might have thought that lechatchila we'd read the Megillah in Adar Rishon and in Adar Sheni. Kamash malan b'chol shana v'shana, that's not true. That we should read it only in the second month. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi, Hai Shenis my Avidlei. These psukim are very strong. If the psukim are organized in such a way where we are able to trump Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos, so then how is Rabbi Yossi left with his shita that we read it in the first month because of Ein Ma'avir and Ala Mitzvos? No, we have psukim that override that. So he says, I agree that those psukim exist, but I learned one of them differently. My Avidlei, what does he do with the word Hashenis? First, they established Purim in Shushan, and that is what they used the word Shenis for, was to expand the obligation for Purim from only being in Shushan to being all over the world. Amar of Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Shmuel Bar Yehuda says, Shalcha lahem Esther lechachamim kivauni ledoros. I want you to be kovea me for eternity. Rashi, second line, liyom tov, that Purim should be forever. Shalchula, we're a little bit concerned about that, Esther, Queen Esther. Kina at me'oreres aleinu lebein ha'umos. If we have this day when we celebrate the destruction of all of our enemies, and it's every year, and we have a whole big, pile on of cars dropping off Mishlach Manos, and we're reading the Megillah, and we're clapping on the table for Haman. I mean, everybody's it's like sticking your finger in their eye. Like, just don't, it's not right. Shal chalahem, don't worry. Kfar ksuva ani al divrei hayamim lamalchei madayu paras. Everybody knows about this already. It's not a chiddush, and everybody knows, and it's not going to be perceived that way. Next similar quote that is discussed is as follows. Rav v'Rav Chanina v'Rav Yochanan v'Rav Chaviva. We've seen this in Shas before, apparently 2 times. It says in the Maseches Shas, we saw this in Maseches Sukkah, and then we saw it in Shabbos, where these 4 Amoraim are quoted together: Rav Chanina, Rav Yochanan, and Rav Chaviva. And the Gemara says, "Masnu b'kulei seder moed kol ki haizuga." This group is always written about together. However, Chilufei Rav Yochanan u'ma'ayel Rav Yonasan. Some say that it wasn't Rav Yochanan and it might have been Rav Yonasan. Either way, what did they teach? Shalchalem Esther lechachamim kisvuni ledoros. I want my book to be written for generations. In other words, I want Megillah Esther to be included in the canon. I want it to be included in Tanakh. Not everything is included in Tanakh. So what was the backstory here about as to how it got involved in Tanakh? So the Gemara is telling us that Esther asked for this to be part of the canon. And the Gemara says, Shalchulei, these 4 Amoraim wrote, they couldn't really be talking to her, but that they sent back, that's a problem. Halo kosafti lach shlishi. It already speaks about the destruction over our enemies in the Torah, about Mechias Amalek 3 times, and Haman was Amalek. Shlishim v'lo rivayim. We're not allowed to say it 4 times. We can only have 3 references, and we already have some. And then the way that this was solved was ad shematzu lo mikra kasu b'Torah. Then they found another pasuk in the Torah that gave a little more rope, and that is how Esther got included in the canon of the 24 books of Tanakh. And says the Gemara, what's the pasuk? Ksov zos zikaron basefer. This is a pasuk that is found in Sefer Shmos. And now we have to darshan this pasuk to understand how we have 4 opportunities to speak about Mechias Amalek. Ksov zos zikaron basefer. There's only 4 words in the pasuk. How do you have references to 4 things? So the Gemara says as follows: Ksov zos masha kasuv kan uva Mishnah Torah. That which is written over here in Sefer Shmos, and that which is written in Mishnah Torah, which is Sefer Dvarim. That's 2 references to Amalek. Zikaron, what does that pasuk mean? Masha kasu b'nevim. And then the last one, Basefer, Masha kasu b'Megillah. So if you have 4 Mari Mekomos, 4 opportunities to teach about Mechias Amalek, then we can include Megillas Esther in the canon. However, it's not so simple. It says the Gemara about a little bit more than a third of the way down, 8 lines before the wide lines, Ketanoi. There's actually a machlokas tanaim how to read this pasuk. One of them reads it like this: Ksov zos masha kasuv kan. Only that which is written in Shmos, excluding the one written in Mishnah Torah and Dvarim. And then Zikaron is Masha Kasu b'Mishnah Torah is number 2. And then Basefer Masha Kasu b'Nevim Divri Rabbi Yoshua. According to Rabbi Yoshua, there wasn't enough latitude to include Esther into the canon. And that's why there's a machlokas tanaim about this. And then Rabbi Elazar Hamodai Omer, he learns the pasuk the way we initially learned it above. So Zos means Masha Kasuv Kan Uva Mishnah Torah. That's 2. That we have Shemos and Dvarim. Zikaron, that word in the pasuk means Masha Kasuv b'Nevim, and Basefer Masha Kasuv b'Megillah. There you go. So then, according to Rabbi Elazar, he says that we do have enough space in the canon for another reference to Mechias Amalek, and then Megillah will be included. And the Gemara references a din that we learned a long time ago, I think in Maseches Shabbos. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Esther eina metames hayadayim. Normally, we assume that scrolls are metames hayadayim because people were leaving food there so that no one would take it, but that brought mice, and the mice ate the parchment. So they said that it's a metames hayadayim, so they didn't want the food to become tameh, because back in the day, tumah v'tara, ruining food was a big deal. So they made the scrolls tameh, but they said Esther is not going to be metameh your hands. The scroll will not be problematic. Why not? Amar Shmuel, Lememra, this implies to Savar Shmuel, Esther la beruach HaKodesh nemra. This seems to imply that Esther was not written with Ruach HaKodesh. It seems to be the underpinning of this Gemara, of this line, is that which is restricted by Tuma has to have been written beruach HaKodesh, which is an interesting assumption, but that's what the Gemara says. So says the Gemara, how can Shmuel leave an implication that it was not written beruach HaKodesh? After all, the Amar Shmuel, he himself wrote first of the middle width lines that Esther beruach HaKodesh nemra. So we already know this. So then that doesn't make sense. So says the Gemara, nemra likros. You're right, it was said beruach HaKodesh so that it should be read. But velo namra lichtov, it doesn't need to be written on parchment, no big deal. And therefore the scroll may not have the status of tuma, as we discussed earlier. Says the Gemara, still doesn't work. Meisvei, we have a brisa. It's a brisa, it's a Mishnah actually in Maseches Yadayim. That's what it says here on the side. Reb Meir Omer Koheles enu metame seyadayim. Reb Meir says that Megillas Koheles is not metame by the touch of hands, or by touching hands. Umachlokes b'shir hashirim. There's a discussion about shir hashirim. Reb Yossi says no, shir hashirim metame seyadayim. Umachlokes bekoheles. Reb Shimon Omer Koheles mikule beishamay michumre beisalel. That's a discussion between the two of them about Koheles. Aval rus v'shir hashirim v'eshter metame sayadayim. So that's a problem, because now we have a brisa that says that Esther is metames hayodayim, but 6 lines ago, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel says that Esther is not metames hayodayim, and he's an Amora. You can't go against the brisa. So how do we solve that problem? So the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, Huda Amar Rabbi Yoshua. Now everything is blending together. He holds like Rabbi Yoshua that says that there wasn't enough space in the canon to speak about Mechias Amalek yet again, because he learned the pasuk of Ksov Zos Zikaron B'Sefer as only having 3 opportunities, and therefore he held that it was not part of the canon. And even if it was said Baruch HaKodesh, it doesn't matter. It's not part of the canon, and therefore he says that there's no tuma there. So that's how the two of them discussed this. But this author of this brisa held like Rabbi Elazar Bar Modai, who held that there were 4 spaces in the canon, and therefore Megillah could be included, and therefore it is Metamen Sayadayim. So the machlokes of whether or not Esther would have the tuma of Tumas Yadayim is whether or not we hold that it's part of the canon. That's basically what it's connected to. Right, exactly. So those 3 sugyas are all intertwined very intricately, like a braid. So that's what the Gemara says. That brings us to a brisa, Tanya. The brisa writes, Rav Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Koheles einu metames hayadayim b'nei shechachmaso shel Shlomo. This is interesting. Koheles wasn't written b'ruach hakodesh; it was written b'chachma. Ruach HaKodesh is tapping into the next level, things that we don't really understand. Maybe we've had these experiences with Rabbanim before. You talk to a Rav and they tell you something about you that they're not supposed to know, these kind of heebie-jeebie things. Let's call that Ruach HaKodesh for now. But that's not how Koheles was written. It was written with Chachma. Amar Lo, they said, if that's true, Shlomo authored a lot of things. Amar Lo, V'chizu bilvad Amar. V'halo kvar nemar, V'yidaber shloshes alafim mashal. He wrote all of Mishlei, all of these beautiful mashalim, the Omer, and as well, al tosef al dvarav. And as well, we know that there are a lot of things which can't be the case, because if you say al tosef al dvarav, that you're not allowed to add to them, that implies that it's beruach hakodesh. If it's chachma, you can add more. It's Ruach HaKodesh, you can't add more. So how do we understand these psukim? Mai ve'omer. How do we understand the second pasuk of Al Tosef Al Dvarav? V'chitemar meimar tuva amar. You can just say whatever you want. And de'ibai ichtov, u'de'ibai lo ichtov. Whether or not you write it is irrelevant. That's not correct. Toshma Al Tosef Al Dvarav. No, we know that it was written by Ruach HaKodesh because you're not allowed to add to it. Tanya, the Brisa writes, we know Rabbi Eliezer Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra, and now the Gemara is going to bring a bunch of rayas for this. How do we know that Esther was written Baruch HaKodesh from the text itself? Shenemar by Yomer Haman Bilibo. How would we know what Haman said in his heart if not for the fact that it was written Baruch HaKodesh? This was part of the story where he said, where he was called in by Achashverosh, and Achashverosh said, what should I do to treat someone who's been so good to the king? So he says, walk them on a horse adorned in the clothes of the melech, and they're going to call before him. This is how the king treats people who are good to him. Beautiful. So that because we wrote that because the Megillah writes, that it was Belibo in his heart. We have no other way of knowing. It must have been that it was written B'nevuah. Rabbi Akiva Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemar for a different reason. Shneimar Batihi Esther Nosei Schein Beinei Koroah, that everyone felt comfortable around her, that everyone liked her. So good. How do we know that everybody liked her? We don't know that everybody liked her. So it must be that it was Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Meir Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemar for another pasuk. Shneimar Vayivada Hadavar LeMordechai by Big Son and Zeresh, that it became known to him. What does that mean? It must be Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaskis. This is the fourth sheet. Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemar Shneimar Uvabizalo Shalchu Es Yadam. That when the Jews went on a killing path over the course of the end of the story of the Megillah, they didn't touch any of the spoils. How do you know? The people were dead. Who's there to talk about it? So says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel's an Amora. The previous 4 comments were all from Tanoim. So Shmuel says, Yehavoi Hasam, had I lived at their time, I would not have said any of their psukim. Hava Amin, I would have said Milsa da Adifa Mikul, I would have said something that's better than all of their comments. I have the biggest proof ever that Esther was written Baruch HaKodesh, and Emar Kimu V'Kiblu. The pasuk says in the Megillah, Kimu v'Kiblu, and while in Maseches Shabbos we know the famous drush of Kimu Masha Kiblu Kfar, that the Jews now accepted upon themselves the Torah in a more pure form, because in the initial one the mountain was held over their head, Kafalem Har Kigigis. So the Gemara says, what happened? What does it mean Kimu v'Kiblu? So that means that they rekindled the Torah, they renewed their vows. So here this drush is a little different. Kimu v'Kiblu, 12 lines from the bottom. Kimu Lamala Masha Kiblu Lamata. That the upstairs and the downstairs, what's going on upstairs in the heavens and what's going on down here with the Jews was all aligned. There's no way to know that. That's upstairs information. That means you have to have Ruach HaKodesh. And Omar Rava lived a couple generations after Shmuel, and he said after hearing the sugya, he saw the sugya with all the Tanaim, and then he saw Shmuel's comment. He said, Omar Rava Lakulu Islu Pircha Levarmi de Shmuel de Les Pircha. All of the shitas that we just quoted that are trying to prove Ruach HaKodesh, they all have problems with them except for Shmuel's shita. And then he goes through all of them. The Rabbi Eliezer Svarahu. The lo hava inish of the malka kavase Haman, where we said that Haman said Belibo in his heart. No, Haman made a svara. Who was the most important person in the kingdom other than the king? It was Haman. They want to do such good things to him. They must be they're talking about me. We're projecting what he was thinking because of the context. It's contextual learning. We don't always know what every word in the Gemara means. Sometimes we're like, I don't know, but I know exactly what's happening. He doesn't know what the one word means. So we don't know exactly what happened in Haman's heart, but in context, he assumed that Achashverosh was talking about him to walk him through the streets. He thought he was talking about him, so that was what it meant. That would be a kasha on him. And then next, the Rabbi Akiva, the pasuk by Rabbi Akiva, The pasuk that he said was that Esther was no chen, that everybody liked her. Dilma, ki Rebbe Lazar. Maybe we understand Esther like we understand Rebbe Lazar. Da'amar malamed shekol echad ve'echad nid misalo ki umaso. Nobody knew she was Jewish. She looked, I guess, of Persian descent. Her skin color matched all of the other communities around her. Everybody thought they were from her. She was from their country. So says the Gemara. That's what Rabbi Yellev said. Nid misalo ki umaso. Everyone's like, oh, you must be from Persia. Oh, you must be from Chush. Oh, you must be from here. That no one. She's like, sure, yeah, I live wherever you think I live. No problem. And that's why. Rabbi Meir, the pasuk that Rabbi Meir said, which was Vayivada Hadavar LeMordechai, that wasn't because of Ruach HaKodesh. Dilma Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Maybe it was like the sheet of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who says, Amar Big Son V'Seresh Shnei Tarsim Habu. They were from a country of Tarsim, and Mordechai spoke 70 languages and knew their language. He heard them talking. Vayivada became known because they didn't think he knew that. They knew he was a Jew. So they thought he spoke the local parlance of Farsi, whatever they spoke. I have no idea. And Hebrew, and maybe a little Yiddish. I doubt it. It's very doubtful. The Persians don't speak Yiddish, but he knew their language. So because of that, all is well. So there's no proof of prophecy from here. Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaskis, his shita, which was of the opinion that the pasuk was that they didn't take from the spoils. Dilma, Pristiki Shador, maybe there were witnesses, maybe there were some messengers who saw what was going on, and they passed on the word. Wow, those Jews are amazing. They didn't take anything, even when they could have. Everyone was dead, and they would have had every right. They wanted to kill all the Jews. Would have been right for them to take it. No problem. That's not a problem. And there was no one to steal from anymore because they were all dead. It's not even Geneva. Fine. So that's what the Gemara says. But the Shmuel, the beautiful sheet of Shmuel of Kimu v'Kiblu, there, Vadai Lesle Pircha, there's no one who could ask a question on that. Amar Ravina says, Hainu da Amri Inchi Tavachada Pilpalta Charifta. It's better to have one pepper seed, Mimalet Tzani Kari, than a basket full of melons. It's a little bit of a derogatory comment to all of the Tanaim who are now being equated with large melons relative to one little pepper seed. But apparently Shmuel was extremely capable in his own right in ways that we don't understand. Like the greats of this generation refer to themselves as Ka'afar ve'efer relative to the previous generation. And going back, everybody felt the same way about the previous generation. Remember, Moshe Feinstein felt that about the Gra. And the Gra felt that way about, I don't know, the Ramchal. I don't know, you keep going back. We can't even fathom the greatness. Like these people are on a whole nother level of mastery of self. It's just so hard to understand. So these phrases, they're out of our realms a little bit, but that's what the Gemara says, is you're trying to compare one pepper seed, one Shmuel, to an entire basket of melons. Says the Gemara, the Shmuel, Vadai Lesle Pircha. Amar Ravina, okay, next line. Rav Yosef Amar Mehacha. Rav Yosef says that we know that Esther was written Beruach HaKodesh from the following pasuk. V'mei hapurim ha'ele lo yavru mitoch haYehudim. This is brilliant. He says, how did we know at the time that the Megillah was written that people would keep Purim forever? There are plenty of things in Megillah's times that were scrapped. So says Rav Yosef, the Horaya, that it must be that this is Nevuah, because in the times of Rav Yosef, it had already been, 1,000 years? I don't know. It's been a little while since the Purim story. So people were still keeping it. So, but who says it's going to be kept all the way in the future? So that's a beautiful raya. And Rav Nachman, similarly, Rav Nachman Yitzchak Omer Mehacha v'zichram lo yasuf mizaram. The memory of this will not fade from the Jewish people, and in fact, of course, that remains true. So a lot of different rayas to say that it's written Beruach HaKodesh. Sometimes you see this in the Torah, Ad Hayom Hazeh, like these phrases. So when you see these kinds of things, it's kind of a little bit of a prophetic lens. This almost belongs in like the Aish manual for for proving that the Torah is authentic, the discovery program, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of things like that. And okay, fine, another time. So it says the Gemara as follows at the two dots toward the bottom of the page. Sorry for the long shiur, just a huge amount of information. In regards to the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos, this is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, Shtei Manos, the Ish Echad. You should give two units, two different foods, sometimes maybe two different brachos, two different foods to one person. That's how you fulfill Mishloach Manos. But umatanos le'evyonim, when you're giving to the poor, not just to a friend, but to poor people, shtei matanos l'shnei b'nei adam. You have to give two foods to two people. The Yehuda Nesiya Shadar Leila Rav Oshia Itma, the thigh of the Igla Tilsa, this wonderful delicacy piece of meat, the Garba de Chamra, and as well a container of wine. Rashi at the bottom of the page says Igla Tilsa is Shlishi Lebeta, the third child. Others say that an Igla Tilsa is not that, but rather it is an animal that is only cooked a third. It's like sous vide, I think was what the language said, that partially cooked meat. Brandis called it out. I don't know. But it's very, very good. Shalach le, he sent him, Kayam tabanu Rabbeinu, you fulfill the dictum, the pasuk that's in Megillah, Mishloach manos ish l're'ehu. We're going to stop at the Mishnah, so we have about 30 more lines to go, and then we'll be done. We take out the words matanos le'avyonim because he didn't fulfill the matanos le'avyonim. That's not correct. He wasn't an evyon. The person wasn't poor. He gave him mishloach manos. Rabba Shadar Leilamari Bar Mar. He sent him a gift. Rabba, 3rd century of Amoraim, he sent Mishloach Manos. And he sent it Biyad Abai, and it was Malay, it was a full taska, a basket of the kispa, a full basket of dates. Umale Kasacharma de Afshuna. It was a certain type of flour that had a very sweet flavor to it. Amar le Abaye, Abaye says to him, Hashda Amar Mari. Mari is going to say about you, Rabba, Ichakla Malka Lahava. If you had been a farmer, Dikula Mitzabora Lonachis, you've never taken the basket, the feeding basket off of your neck, meaning you're giving simple food that everybody has. And then says the Gemara, Hadar Shadar Le, and then Mari sent back a gift to Rabba. Shadar Ihu, Male Taska de Zan Gibila. He sent back a basket that was filled with ginger. Umale Casa de Pil Palta Aricha. And he gave back very long peppers. Maybe it's red peppers, maybe it's spicy jalapeno. I don't know what this is referring to. But Amar Abaye says to Mari, Hashta Amar Mar, Rabba is going to say about you, Ana Shadre Lechulia, I sent him sweet food. The flour and dates that I sent were sweet. The Ihu Shadar Lechurfa, and you're sending me very strong flavored food. Ginger, raw ginger is very hard to eat. Ginger ale is very good for the stomach. It's good for you, but to eat straight ginger is probably very, I don't know, I've never tasted it, but it doesn't seem like the kind of thing you'd want to eat as a candy. And you send very flavorful foods. Amar Abaye said, Kinafki mi be Mar, when I left the house of Mar, of my master, so it was pretty amazing. He had quite the food. Hava savana, I was very full. Kimatay lahasam, when I got there, krivuli, they put in front of me shitin 60, tsae 60 plates, the shitin minek deira of 60 kinds of foods. It's the smorgasbord of smorgasbords. Ba'achle behu shitin plugi, and I ate 60 portions. Ubishula basrai sahabu karla tzale kedar. The 60th of them all was the most flavorful of them all. It was a pot roast. Uva lemechas tza basrai. I wanted to eat the plate when I was done. It was so good. Lemechas, the Meforshim point out, is kisus. It's a type of chewing, which is like not a good kind of chewing. It's like not like healthy chewing. So we don't eat plates. So that's what the Gemara says. Sometimes my kids, when they like the food, they pick up the plate and they just lick the plate top to bottom until it's clean as can be. So it was obviously very flavorful. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, Hainu da Amre Inche Kafin Anya V'lo Yada. Starving are the poor and they don't even know it. Once you get your appetite going, this is true of some people, then you just can't stop eating. So we discuss this in my family a lot. A lot of us in my family, when we get full, we stop eating. And there are people who are like, what does that mean? What does full and stopping to eat have to do with each other? So I can't eat when I'm full and other people can. I don't even understand it. Says the Gemara, Inami, there's another phrase. This is a well-known catchphrase that people say in regards to dessert. Rav you can always find room for the sweets. You can always find room for the desserts. This is a fact. 1/3 of the way down. Abaye bar Avin, Reb Chanina bar Avin, Michlefei Seudasaihu lehadade. They would alternate years of having meals with one another on Purim. Amar Rava, and this is the famous din of drinking alcohol on Purim. Amar Rava, mechayiv inish livsume bepuria. A man is obligated to become mivusam, to become intoxicated bepuria on Purim. Until he is so drunk that he doesn't know the difference between Araham and the Baruch Mordechai. This is a big discussion in the poskim as to whether or not there's an absolute chiyuv to drink. According to some, you can take a drink and take a nap, and when you fall asleep, you will not be Yodeh bin Araham and the Baruch Mordechai. But one thing is for sure: if you drink and you act like a behemoth, you're not supposed to drink. That's for sure. That's for sure. There's no outlet for this. One of my friends was in a master's program. I think in YU, and somebody raised their hands. They were talking about alcohol. They said the Jews got it right. They have one day off. So the guy in the room said, excuse me, you don't have a day off. You have to be a mensch 365 days a year. And if you can't drink like a mensch, then don't drink. The mitzvah is not to drink. The mitzvah is to reach a certain level. Fine, whatever that means. Nichnas yayin, yatsa sod. Yayin is wine, and the gematria is 70, and sod is a depth of learning. Right? We have pshat, remez, drash, sod. The deepest level of learning can be tapped into. Fine, I got it. But if you're a behema gasa, when you're drinking, then don't drink. That's my Rabbeim. We're always very clear about that. The mitzvah is not to be a behema. The mitzvah is to be a good person, and it's not a day off. It is a day on. And Yom Kippurim, the day that Yom Kippur is only like the day of Purim. Purim is the higher level. Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur is the second level. It's a peak day. So if anyone is planning on being a behema, they should not be drinking. Rabba v'Reb Zera avdu sudas Purim b'hadei hadade. Rabba and Reb Zera, again 3rd century, they had their sudas Purim together. Ifsum, they got very drunk. Kam Rabba and shachte Reb Zera. Literally, it means that he slaughtered Reb Zera. The basic pshat in the Gemara is he actually killed him, because the next line wouldn't make any sense. Lamachar, after he woke up, Rabba realized what he did, which was very bad. No problem. I'm just going to daven and everything is going to be okay. And he revived him. Some Meforshim say this isn't literal. Okay. Lashana, the next year, Rabba sends out an invite and he's like, hey, last year was so much fun. Amar le, Nasi Marvin Abitsu Daspar Mahadadade, come over. I get the same food as last year. Amar le, thank you for the invitation, but I will politely or not so politely decline. Lo b'chol shaita b'shaita misrachesh nisa. You don't always get to be the beneficiary of a miracle. I'm glad you know how to daven. Please daven for me. I'm not coming for Purim. Amar Rava, Sudas Purim she'achla balayla lo yatsa yedei chovah. So our final sugya for the day, that one is not allowed to have their Sudas Purim at night. It needs to start during the day. My taima, yemei nishta v'simcha ksiv. It says during the day. That was interesting because of the following story. It seemed that somebody didn't know this. Rav Ashi, who lived after Rava, Rav Ashi and Ravina were two of the editors of the Gemara, not the Gemara as we know it, but a previous iteration of the Gemara where there were only Mishnayos and Brisas and Memras, raw statements, but most of the Shakla Batari was written later by the Savoraim, a group after the Amoraim. Rav Ashi Abba Yosef Kamid Rav Kahana, he went to the Beis Medrash to go learn on Purim day. Nagai, it was very late. V'lo asur rabbanan. The Chaver didn't come to the Beis Medrash to learn. Amar le, my time lo asur rabbanan. Why? Where is everybody? So he said, Dilma tridi b'sudas Purim. Maybe it's the daytime. Maybe everybody's eating their suda. So the student said to the Rebbe, Amar le, v'lo hava afshar lemechla be'urta. Why didn't they eat at night? Why come learn? What is wrong with you? You got to be in the Beis Medrash. Amar le, lo shmile lemar hada amar rava sudas Purim she'achla balayla lo yatzadei chavasa. These are ABCs, right? Again, we take it for granted. We know these halachas like it's simple. Pasha. These Amoraim Pasha didn't know. It's unbelievable. The development of halacha. They're living the development of halacha. They didn't know that the Sudas Purim had to be during the day. Amar le, Amar Rava Hachi. Did he really say that? It's unbelievable. Amar le, in fact, he did. And that's how we know that. So he learned it 40 times because he wanted to get it into his bones. Tana minei arba in zimnin. He learned the whole sugya 40 times. V'dami le kemad manach bekisa. He learned it 40 times, and then that is something that it's as if he had it in his pocket. This is one of the klalim people say about learning. If you learn things 40 times, it's in the vault. But as we started out today, or right close to the beginning, is that here we need some siyata d'shmaya. Memory is not just about the yigia; it is also about having siyata d'shmaya. We'll stop here at the Mishnah. Too much learning for one day. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful day.
Too much learning.